Mr. Robot is a masterclass in psychological discovery and exploration. It delves into the depths of humanity through its characters in such magnificent ways. While it would be nearly impossible to explore all of the show's psychological depth in one video, I would at least like to look at two aspects of psychology that are heavily prevalent in the show: attachment theory and mental illness. According to the University of Illinois, the theory of attachment was originally developed by John Bowlby, a British psychoanalyst who was attempting to understand the intense distress experienced by infants who had been separated from their parents. Bowlby observed that separated infants would go to extraordinary lengths, such as crying, clinging, frantically searching, to prevent separation from their parents, or to reestablish proximity to a missing parent. At the time of Bowlby's initial writings, psychoanalytic writers held that these expressions were manifestations of immature defense mechanisms that were operating to repress emotional pain, but Bowlby noted that such expressions are common to a wide variety of mammalian species and speculated that these behaviors may serve an evolutionary function. The basis of attachment theory lies in one's emotional environment, where they were raised, and how that influences one's ability to form relationships with the people around them in their adult lives. There are 4 attachment styles that lie on a spectrum of sorts: secure, avoidant, preoccupied, and fearful avoidant. The preoccupied can also be known as anxious, and the fearful avoidant can also be known as disorganized. The secure attachment allows for an individual to form healthy bonds with the people around them. They are secure and comfortable enough in their own skin, but they can also feel secure and comfortable with others. The avoidant, on another hand, will dismiss and avoid close relationships with people. They tend to keep people at a distance and preserve their own autonomy and safety above all else. They may feel smothered by affection and are unlikely to be affectionate with others. The preoccupied or anxious person lacks confidence in themselves and to be by themselves, thus they cling on to others in the hopes that they will be safe and protected. The fearful avoidant or the disorganized person is a mix of the avoidant and the preoccupied. They withdraw from people in fear of being smothered and consumed by their demands, but they deeply seek connections with people around them, causing a constant push-pull relationship between their desire for autonomy and their desire for closeness. Why is this relevant to Mr. Robot? I would argue that Mr. Robot is a deeply character-driven narrative where the characters, particularly Elliot and Mr. Robot, drive the story forward. Therefore, I feel it is appropriate to analyze the character relationships and their attachment towards one another. Elliot, the series protagonist, is a prime example of the disorganized or fearful avoidant attachment style. He is initially withdrawn, sullen, and detached from the world around him. He refuses to connect deeply with people and pushes them away before they can get too close for fear of being hurt by them. He deeply distrusts people, the world, and the institutions around him, and has intense paranoia about a global conspiracy that controls the world and the people in it. In essence, he is a prime example of the disorganized attachment style because he has this internal need for human connection deep below this internal paranoia. Just like anyone else, he wants human connection, but his way of approaching it is atypical. He hacks people and invades their privacy in order to find out their deepest secrets and to connect with them in his own way. This is due to the immense trauma that he endured as a child. He was sexually abused by his father, and his mother physically and verbally abused him. His own caregivers, the leading role models in his life, tortured him throughout his childhood, which ultimately caused him to become the paranoid, socially anxious, and awkward Elliot that we know in the series. Or at least this is what manifested as the personality that is known as the mastermind, as revealed in the series finale. Regardless, Elliot's way of forming attachments follows a pattern of push and pull, of forming and withdrawal or destruction. An example of this is his relationship with Olivia Cortez. He courts her and moves towards her because he desires a connection with her, only to later destroy their relationship by drugging and manipulating her. Of course, Elliot has his own reasons and rationalization for this. He needed Olivia to give him access to the Cyprus National Bank in order to access the Deus Group's money. Ultimately, though, he still burns bridges and destroys the intimate bonds that he forms with the people around him in this obsessive pursuit of justice. This is the fatal flaw of the mastermind and a major theme within the series as a whole. On another hand, Darlene is a prime example of the anxious attachment style. While she acts like a free spirit, it's made clear throughout the series that Darlene has an incessant need to be around particular people. Whether it's Cisco or Elliot, she clings on to people, particularly men, in her life in order to feel a sense of safety and connection. In particular, she clings on to Elliot and sees him as a bastion of protection and safety. She even hopes that he'll seek revenge for her if something were to happen to her. Darlene has her own trauma that shapes the way she forms connections. While she was never sexually abused by her father, she was physically and emotionally abused by her mother. She never felt a sense of connection towards her own parents, which drives her to seek those connections in other people. She wants to feel safe, protected, and loved by the people around her, hence why she clings onto them. An example of this is when she tells Cisco the story of how she was essentially kidnapped by an older woman at a theme park. Darlene revels in the feeling of being loved and appreciated and thinks back on it as a happy memory, as if she was blessed to be taken away from her family and treated like a princess by a stranger. Objectively, this situation is horrible, as no child should be kidnapped and taken from their parents. However, Darlene's position is sympathetic, as she grew up with horribly abusive parents and a particularly abusive mother who could never show her true, unconditional love. Therefore, the story is ultimately tragic. White Rose is a prime example of the avoidant attachment style. Even though her motivation for becoming White Rose is rooted in her love for Chen, and she is able to love Grant, she keeps everyone at an arm's length of distance. She refuses to let anyone in close and operates as rationally as possible in order to execute her plans and ambitions. During her relationship with Chen, she was unable to recognize the deep suffering and pain he endured through the relationship due to her own ambitions and goals blinding her. She sees her relationship as Grant later on in the series as transactional and expects Grant to sacrifice himself for her, which he eventually does. White Rose is in a perpetual state of self-preservation where she refuses to allow her interpersonal relationships to interfere with her ambitions and delusions of grandeur, effectively making her an avoidantly attached person. I couldn't really find an example of a secure attachment in Mr. Robot, as the show is full of insecure attachment due to the unstable mental health being a major theme within the show, so I'll skip over that one. Speaking of mental illness is the other side of the psychological coin for Mr. Robot. Most of the characters exhibit some form of mental illness, but we'll only dive into two, Elliot and White Rose. Starting off with Elliot, he is a primordial example of unstable mental illness. He's depressed, isolated, and lonely. He wallows in his own suffering and breaks down emotionally constantly due to his detachment from the world and from the people around him, which is a stellar example of depression. Furthermore, he has intense anxiety and paranoia. He's socially anxious and awkward as he fails to understand social norms and conventions and fumbles his way through every social interaction due to his crippling anxiety and distrust of other people. Speaking of distrust, Elliot is a highly paranoid and delusional person. He believes in this grand conspiracy of men in black controlling the world and persecuting him for being a vigilante hacker. He's highly distrustful of other people in general due to his traumatic past with his parents. Finally, Elliot experiences hallucinations of his dead father, who manifests himself as an entirely separate personality within Elliot's mind, Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot represents the father Elliot should have had, a protector figure, one who should have defended Elliot from the dangers of the world rather than exposing him to how cruel, ugly, and dangerous the world can be. While Elliot officially has depression, anxiety, and later is discovered to have dissociative identity disorder, I would also argue that he has some form of a psychotic disorder, whether it's depression with psychotic features, schizophrenia, or even schizoaffective disorder. And I'm not a psychologist, but I do believe he has some form of psychosis due to his paranoia and delusions. Moving on to White Rose, I believe that White Rose has narcissistic traits along with gender dysphoria. To explain the narcissistic traits, she has these grand delusions, these delusions of grandeur, where she sees herself as a messianic figure who will bring upon a new, perfected reality that can resurrect the dead and that can reverse time. Furthermore, she's a highly manipulative person who uses the people around her like pawns in a global game of chess. She's very callous and has a disregard for human life, justifying every sacrifice as a means to an end. And this goes back to her delusions of grandeur, where she genuinely believes that the lives lost along the way will be undone through her device that would reset reality and reverse time. Now, on to White Rose's gender dysphoria. It's clear from the get-go that White Rose doesn't identify with her sex assigned at birth and feels an immense amount of shame and dysphoria from this. She projects this dysphoria as a need for control, especially control over time, since it's the one thing in the world she lacks total control over. What makes her dysphoria even worse is the society that she lives in. China isn't known for being a safe haven for the LGBT community. It's famously oppressive against the community and cracks down on people for their sexual orientation and gender identity. Therefore, as a high-ranking official in the CCP, it would be impossible for White Rose to maintain her status and validate her gender identity. She couldn't go through a sex change if she wanted to. Therefore, she lives in two conflicting worlds that are at odds with one another, so she seeks to merge them into one by reversing time and distorting the reality she was born into. I could go on and on about Mr. Robot, but I think I'll end things here. It's a revolutionary tale that truly dives deep into the psychology of its characters. From their attachments to their mental illnesses, they don't pull punches in creating an immense amount of psychological depth in the characterization department. Thank you for watching and see you later.